I grew up in a Baptist church, and we had wonderful pastors and leaders, and we heard about the devil, but I'd never come face to face with the reality of evil. I mean, seen the face of evil to an experience in my own life when I was 20 years of age, and I was a student at a Baptist university preparing to preach. I was already preaching and playing baseball, college baseball, and having a great life, and grew up in really an idyllic home, a Christian home. My dad was my hero. He was working in a hardware store in Fort Worth, Texas, and a man came in and to steal something, and he ends up with this man with a hammer in his hand and bludgeons my father. My dad never regained consciousness. He lived for 10 days, and like many families, you know, we lived there at that hospital, and we'd go into the ICU to see him and just prayed that he would live. And again, he never regained consciousness. And I remember the night that he died, I slipped off into the little chapel of that hospital. And I'm always grateful for those little chapels and hospitals that still exist today in many places. And I got there, I was alone. Somehow I ended up staying late, and God met me in that room at a very deep level, one that I can't even describe, the reality of Jesus. And as a 20-year-old preacher, I certainly needed that. But what I really learned was that I was facing an enemy that I wasn't aware was so strong. And it really forged me as a young man and as a young minister and pastor to do battle. And you know, it was almost like I wasn't trying to be arrogant, but it was like I wanted to say, okay, Satan, you know, we're going to war now, and I've got the advantage because I know Jesus. And I didn't know a lot about spiritual warfare, but when I was a little boy, there was a bishop on television. You may remember him, Fulton J. Sheen.
Yes.
He was one of the first television preachers, and he was a Catholic bishop. Now, a little Baptist boy shouldn't be watching Catholics on television, right? So I had to slip off to do it, but I was always fascinated by his robes and all of that. But what really captured me as a little boy was the opening to that show. Because these were the early days, you know, I was watching it on my 1954 Philco black and white. So it was very, very primitive. But there was a dark screen, and then a hand appears, and you may remember this, strikes a match, and then lights a candle. Yes. And then the voiceover sounded pretty creepy to me as a little kid, but the voiceover said, better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. Mm-hmm. And somehow, even as a little boy, that stuck in my heart and in my mind. And so I had to decide on the death of my father, the brutal murder of my father. I mean, this is something you think happens to somebody else. You see it on the news. Now we're the victims of a terribly brutal and violent crime. My dad, and I loved, was my hero. You think your dad's indestructible. I thought he was, and now he's gone. My mother's devastated. We're all devastated. So we're facing evil, and so I could shake my fist at the darkness and rant even at God, or I could light the night. I could take as my life mission the message of light in Jesus Christ. And what does the scripture say? We overcome evil with good. So we don't overcome the devil by shouting at the devil or shouting at the darkness or even preaching at it sometimes. The only thing you need for darkness is the absence of light. And what we need to do, you don't light the dark, you don't dark the darkness, you light the night. And so that's what we're called to do, and that's what I spent my life doing.